And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week.
It's Memorial Day weekend and the unofficial start of summer, which you know makes me very, very happy. We'll talk about Memorial Day in a moment, but there's a lot going on, so let's start from the top. The Preakness is behind us now, and we know Seize the Gray wins at Pimlico, meaning there will be no Triple Crown winner this year. D. Wayne Lucas, fabled and iconic trainer, the oldest yet to win one of the Triple Crown races. He has multiple wins at Churchill Downs and at Pimlico and at Belmont. So we'll see what happens up in Belmont in a couple of weeks. You know, it's always interesting because they have a much shorter or smaller field, not shorter, smaller field at Belmont, much longer race. So stay tuned. And a couple of other sports notes. Harrison Butker, in his controversial speech. I'm still trying to figure out what was so controversial about it. I've listened to it several times, and I'd encourage every one of you to listen to it. It's a really great speech, but the media calls it controversial. But what has happened? Thousands of people flocked to his side, and his jersey is the top-selling sports item in America today. That tells you that in all of this woke nuttiness, there's still hope for America. And gotta mention it, after 50, the Philadelphia Phillies off to their best start in history, best record in the National League, best record in Major League Baseball, and I've probably jinxed them by saying all of that. And it is Memorial Day, a time when we commemorate those who gave the last full measure of devotion in service to our country and its military. And before we take a moment to acknowledge their sacrifice, you know me, I'm a history buff, so I like to talk about the history of these things. And the Memorial Day history is a little bit interesting because there is, as with all things, a little bit of controversy attached to it. The history books will tell you that it dates back to 1868, when General John Logan, the commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, issued a proclamation of Decoration Day for the fallen in the Civil War. But Pennsylvanians know that it goes back a little deeper than that. Some say to 1863 and Gettysburg, but the real claim is laid by a town up in north central Pennsylvania, Boalsburg, PA, which on July 4th, 1864, held the first true Memorial Day. It was celebrated at a different time through the years, but since 1970 it has been on the last Monday in May, and it is again this year. And a time, as I say, to take a moment in all of the picnics and parades and pool openings that we experience on Memorial Day weekend to reverently say thank you to those who gave their lives in defense of this country. And there are three things in particular that you might want to do. One is to decorate a grave, hopefully of someone that you knew and were a loved one, but if not, someone that you didn't know, to simply say thank you for the sacrifice that they made. Two, flying the flag. And as you know, it's flown at half-mast until noon and then at full staff for the remainder of the day. Half staff until noon, full staff for the remainder of the day. And if you can, find one of those poppies. The various service organizations used to sell them. They were ubiquitous, word for the day, when I was a kid, but they're somewhat tough to find anymore. But if you can find one of those poppies and wear it, it's a great way of expressing your gratitude and the gratitude of the nation. And the other trial of the century is winding to a conclusion in a Manhattan courtroom. Both the prosecution and the defense have rested in the trial against Donald J. Trump there. And now the judge is pondering the points of charge and the jury instructions for the jury. You know, this is when judges get to play umpire and call balls and strikes. And we all know what that's about. Unfortunately, this judge has one strike zone for the prosecution and another one for the defense. And that is at the heart of the problem of this trial. Through all of everything else, you've got a judge that should never be there in the first place. He should have recused himself. And now, when you get down to the really, really nitty-gritty, he's got his thumb once again on the scales. Whether or not President Trump can get a fair trial in that courtroom remains to be seen. But I will just simply say this. The matter should have been dismissed already. Why the judge chose not to take a directed verdict is, I think, pretty clear. But, you know, you've got to wonder whether or not he wants to be reversed on appeal, because if there is, in fact, a conviction, and that's still an open question despite this jury pool, I can pretty much guarantee it will be overturned on appeal. And I again remind my friends from outside of New York State that the Supreme Court of New York is not what the Supreme Court in other states is. It's their lowest level of entry jurisdiction or original jurisdiction. It's a trial court, not an appellate court. And through President Trump's time in New York for this trial, he's done some very interesting things. If you remember, he made that surprise visit to Harlem, and you saw the reaction of the folks there. It was staggering to me. I can't imagine other Republican presidential candidates wandering into Harlem on a sunny Monday afternoon and getting the reception that Donald Trump did. He went to a construction site, and you saw those hard-hatted workers cheering for him as loudly and lustily as you possibly can. And now, the day that we're taping this, he's going to hold a rally in the South Bronx. Now, you've got to understand that this is the poorest demographically congressional district in the entire country. This is not a place where Republicans ordinarily would go. But Donald Trump's going there, and already you hear in the media folks from the South Bronx saying, we love him. He fights for the little guy. He fights for me. And in many respects, that's what's going to encapsulate this election. Who will fight for me? And people know that President Trump, at the core, is going to fight for them. It's one of the great reasons why there has been the significant demographic shift to Republicans during the course of the Trump administration and the Biden administration, as people from working class families come increasingly to the Republican Party, including here in my home state of Pennsylvania, where the registration gap has gone from this to this over the course of the past couple of years, as the Republican Party increasingly becomes a populist party and the Democrat Party increasingly one of the privileged elites. And as we close out, to each of you, a wonderful holiday weekend, a great Memorial Day. Please take a moment or two to reflect, remember, and thank those who gave their lives in the defense of this country. And one final political note, as Joe Biden had another terrible week of gaffes, misstatements, outright falsehoods along the trail, we saw what President Trump was doing, and we see what the numbers now reflect. In New York State, where he's going to hold that rally in the South Bronx, it's down to single digits. This is a state that Joe Biden beat him by over 20 points just a couple of years ago. And among African Americans, the numbers continue to go like this. But equally significant or more significant in the fastest growing demographic group in the country, Latinos like myself, guess what? It's dead even between Trump and Biden. No Republican has ever taken a majority of the Latino/Hispanic vote. Donald Trump will this year, and it's increasingly why there's cause for great optimism. As you know, I'm really bullish on this one. And for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.